Hello Reddit and YouTube. Welcome to my TED Talk. I'm Parnellyx, a Challenge Warwick main on the NA server since Season 8. And I've mained Warwick since the first day of his rework back in early Season 7. I have thousands and thousands of games of Warwick played, and I've hit Challenger with Warwick, playing him in 3 different roles: top lane, jungle, and the mid lane, so I think I at least know somewhat what I'm talking about with this champion. But in this video, I'm going to talk about why I think Warwick just sucks this season and what needs to change to not only make him viable in higher elo, but also more reliable, more balanced, and in general just more fun across the board. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to complain about their main champion in League of Legends in the community. Over the last few years, there has not been a very good track record of one-tricks having a clue of how to balance their champion. They're usually extremely biased and completely delusional. I'm going to try to stray away from this and be as reasonable as possible, as I do play other champions in the game as well, so I have some experience there, and I want to take in consideration the overall health of the game when I think about these changes. At the end of the day, I'm just wanting to state my opinions and ideas to help my favorite champion, since I feel like he's been completely abandoned over the years. I don't have the data and statistics that Riot has, I just have my own experiences to base these opinions off of. So for this video, I'll first talk about what I think Warwick's problems are and why he deserves some love, and then I'll get into buff or change suggestions, and then lastly talk about what I see would be the best ways to nerf Warwick if the buffs that I am suggesting push him too far and he required nerfs after the fact. So why does Warwick, of all the champions in the game, deserve some love? Well, to be frank, every champion in the game deserves some love. Riot sometimes will somewhat abandon champions like Warwick, for example, because of their niche and obnoxious play style, or Zac because of his previous prominence in pro play. I think everyone agrees that Riot should step it up for some of these bottom tier champions, but I don't think that Warwick even belongs in the discussion of these bottom tier obnoxious champions for multiple reasons. So for starters, Warwick is a very beginner friendly champion of the game that has potential to be very popular if he becomes smoother to play. Second, Warwick has a unique role in the game, as he's a strong anti-assassin and a counter to many of the newest champions in the game, where most champions seem to get outclassed by champions like Yone, Viego, Aphelios, Irelia, Mordekaiser, or Wukong. Warwick actually really shines. He actually tends to be worse against the older champions, so I don't think that his kit will be outdated anytime soon. And this is large part due to his Q mechanics with canceling CC and following dashes and stuff like that. Next, Warwick has never been abused in pro play or even really in solo queue. There was one time in I believe it was late Season 8 where his win rate was really high and he got nerfed, but his ban rate wasn't even that high at the time, nor was his pick rate, in response to that, so it wasn't like he was crazy obnoxious, despite having a high win rate. Warwick's counterplay is also pretty reasonable at the end of the day. It's average reasonable, I guess. He's a stat check champion, so to an extent, he shouldn't be overbuffed numbers-wise, but he is very kiteable. He's completely single target and melee, so he lacks 1v9 potential. And he's very vulnerable to CC, more so than other champions. So I don't think he is the most obnoxious champion that could get buffed, in the game. Lastly, Warwick is pretty simple to adjust balance-wise, since he is, again, very stat check, and he doesn't have any intangible mechanics that are hard to account for. So if his win rate's up a little bit, they just have to nerf his numbers just a bit, and it's pretty straightforward, I suppose. So those are a couple reasons as to why Warwick deserves love, but why does he actually need it? There's multiple reasons. Warwick got hit big time this season due to the accumulation of multiple indirect nerfs. Machete was removed, which just hurts single target clears quite a bit, especially when you consider that Warwick is the only Machete user in the jungle that had 0 AoE at all to proc the bleed from the new jungle item. Tiamat was also nerfed, Grievous Wounds got buffed, and the mythic items surprisingly just suck on him, honestly. Although I do think that they would probably feel a little bit better if he had a more stable gold income. I tested his clear speed among other junglers this season, and the results are not good when, compared to where he previously was. As, he used to be like above average in clear speed. Now he's pretty poor. And also his ganks aren't even that strong or reliable, so that's an issue. Warwick's win rate suggests that he's struggling as well. Although, honestly, his win rate is a little bit higher than I expect. You might think, well, he's at like a 50% win rate, so that's balanced. But for a champion as easy to pick up and play as Warwick, that's not a good win rate compared to what he's been in previous seasons. I think it's like his third lowest win rate in the past 4 seasons, discounting early preseasons. And Warwick mains across the globe are struggling as well. There isn't a single Master Plus Warwick jungle player in a major region besides myself. When normally there's usually multiple that are like Master or GM. And I've also talked to about 4 or 5 high-ish ELO Warwick mains, and they all complain about him not only being harder to win with, but also just feeling less satisfying and fun to play. And then lastly, Warwick has just been bugged since the release of his rework in early Season 7. In fact, he's not had a single bug fix that's actually been beneficial for him at all. A few times they did bug fix him. A few times he did have a few bugs that worked in his favor, and they bug fixed him, but that was kind of a slap in the face since they acknowledged that he has bugs, but they didn't work on the ones that actually limit the champion. Also, contrary to popular belief, Warwick, while he is held back by bugs, it's not because he has like an endless long list of bugs like old Mordekaiser that would just take forever for Riot to fix. The real problem is, his bug list is actually pretty small. It's around like 10 or so. And it's even less when you consider the ones that are actually a problem. It's just that the few of these bugs that are actually a problem are extremely detrimental to the fun, consistency, and the reliability of Warwick, simply because you encounter them probably every game. And then also, some people might say that asking for Warwick bugs or buffs is crazy, since his win rate is high in the top lane at the moment, but most of my suggestions help out Warwick jungle more than they do Warwick top lane. And even if Warwick top did become overbuffed, they could just nerf a few numbers on like his Q or sustain or something like that to balance him out. I will say that Warwick top, though, in general, isn't as good as he was in high elo last season. He wasn't as good. He isn't as good this season as he was last season. So a lot of the complaints still apply, although I do understand that, if his win rate goes up to like 55% in gold or something, he should probably get nerfed at that point, Now let's go ahead and talk about how to actually go about fixing Warwick this season. The first thing that I want to talk about is going to be, of course, a couple of Warwick's biggest bugs and quality of life issues. The most prominent bug to Warwick is his blood trail bug, which is the oddest one, I think, to not have been fixed yet, since it makes his main ability not work like 20% of the time or something. At least it feels that way. So how Warwick's W should work is that when he sees an enemy that is low, he should be able to run really fast to them out of combat. Classic ability on Warwick that ties into his hunter theme. But the bug is that enemies that are above half health that aren't being hunted by Warwick are able to stand between Warwick and his targets and block the movement speed buff. This can be really frustrating, for example, in team fights, since half the time you can't chase someone since there's going to be someone in the way in a team fight. Or if you're ganking bot lane, for example, when the ADC is low but the support isn't, Warwick isn't going to be able to run fast at the ADC if the support's in the way. It's not even like the high HP enemy either has to stand directly between Warwick and the target, as the hitbox is fairly inconsistent and pretty forgiving, or unforgiving for Warwick, I should say. So this should be priority number 1 for Riot. And if it does increase his win rate too much, which I could see it doing a little bit, they can definitely nerf the movement speed to compensate. But I would definitely prefer if the ability was consistent than if it just had more movement speed, basically, and was inconsistent. Now, as I say all this, I did talk to a writer actually earlier last season about this specific bug in the Twitter DMs, and was told that they were aware of this and that they wanted to eventually rescript his W completely. But he was on basically a do not touch list, which was for champions that aren't high priority, as he was in a balanced spot last season, which I completely understand, but it's been over a year, and at the moment, Warwick does definitely need some help. So I think it's time to go ahead and work on fixing this issue. The next bug, or maybe quality of life oversight, you could say, that should be changed, is to make it so that Warwick's ult can't be canceled by the target he is suppressing. So essentially right now, if Warwick ults and the target buffers a CC ability right before it lands, it will completely cancel his ultimate instantly. Now on paper, that might sound like the enemy is outplaying me and that I need to be more careful when choosing who to ult, but believe me when I say that, like 95% of the time, my ult gets canceled this way by accident. And it's completely unintentional by the other guy. There are so many abilities in the game that have canceled my ultimate that I wasn't even aware has CC attached to them to begin with. I've had it canceled by like Twisted Fate, Gold Card, Cho'Gath W, Victor Ult, and Sejuani Hue. All these abilities, by the way, going off while I'm ulting them. So even if this was an intentional interaction, which it's not, there are countless reasons as to why this should be changed. Basically, the counterplay to Warwick's ult is already extremely high. It's a skill shot that has a pretty small hitbox. It can be QSS'd. It can be canceled by the target's teammates. And it throws Warwick into the middle of a fight with no escape. I get flames quite often in my games because teammates think that I can get off a free engage or a pick. But sometimes I'm just afraid to go in and just int and throw away our leads. So I would like to feel like this ability. I'd like this ability to feel more consistent, so I shouldn't be afraid to ult, basically, if I think I can land my ult on someone, basically. That's what I'm saying. Another bug with Warwick ult is its interaction with QSS. When Warwick ults a target and you use QSS, the target should be able to walk away without taking any more damage, and so should Warwick. But as it stands, when the target uses QSS, Warwick basically stuns himself until the channel completes. So it just feels really bad to be stunned for 1.5 seconds in a fight because the ADC stood in the way of your ultimate and they just used the item active. It's not as that big of a problem, but Warwick mains would definitely like to see this get fixed. Another bug that is new and just came in a few patches ago, which annoys me more than anyone, is that Warwick can no longer use Stride Breaker active during his Q animation. This previously worked, as all Tiamat active items like Gore Drinker and such can be used during his Q for more burst. But a few patches ago, they made it so that you can't Stride Breaker dash out of roots and stuff like that. And apparently Warwick's Q counts as a self root. So at least I'm assuming that's the reason as to why this bug exists. It's a problem for me, specifically because it's my favorite mythic to build right now, and I thought it was like one of the best. But this bug on top of the upcoming nerf is a big L for my favorite puppy. The last bug that I want to mention isn't really a bug, and it isn't even really a major problem at all. I just think it's worth mentioning since it's been around since, the start of Warwick's rework. And it just seems like an easy fix, although I am not a coder, so I don't really know. But I want to mention it. Warwick's Fear counts as like a mini true channel, and it cancels his auto attack, and it disarms him for like a half a second or something like that, which is really weird considering he's, a completely auto attack based champion. So, yeah, I feel like that should get changed just to make the champion feel a little bit smoother. Beyond the bugs, there's a few more buff options that I have in mind. I think Warwick could be made more fun and also more versatile if he had more build variety like he did last season, as there were multiple playstyles that you could opt for, whereas in Season 11, you're basically forced to build Bruiser or Tank every single game with like 2 mythic options. My favorite build in the last few seasons was full AD Warwick, where I would go Warrior and Guardian Angel for a massive mid-game power spike with some big burst damage and a more carry-oriented build. But this season, the AD item options are all more expensive, and they have lethality attached to them, which is not a good stat for Warwick at all, since he does mostly magic damage. I think it'd be really cool if they either gave him like the lethality ratios for his Q damage or in like his E damage reduction or something like that, or if they committed to making AP Warwick a viable option by giving him a full 30% AP ratio in his passive instead of a 10% one, and wave clear options on top of that. Speaking of wave clear options, clear speed, a change should be made for Warwick to compensate for the machete removal and the Tiamat nerfs that made him trash in high elo. A lot of people want Warwick's E to deal damage, at least to monsters, so that he can actually clear raptors and encroach without Tiamat. And I think this would be a pretty good change, especially if they wanted to make AP Warwick a thing, since they could give an AP ratio on Warwick's E so that he can actually farm if he's building AP. But if they're not wanting to commit to AP Warwick, I think that another idea is to have Warwick's E mark monsters with Blood Hunt for like 6 seconds or something. So yeah, when Warwick fears a target, he gets an attack speed buff against the monsters, even if they're above half health. I think this would be a little bit more thematic for Warwick, since it would buff his clear speed like the previous idea. But it would make him auto-attack more instead of casting spells to clear camps. And it would also be more of a buff for higher rank Warwicks, or more experienced Warwicks, I should say. Since the Warwick player would have to actually space out his auto-attacks properly on the AoE camps to optimize the clear speed, instead of just pressing one button and doing AoE damage. Now, personally, I don't really know what is going to be the best option of these two. But I think one of these should be implemented. As right now, Warwick doesn't get a free level 3 or 4 gank every game in high elo like he would in like silver or gold, since laners aren't going to be permanently below half health, thus forcing him to farm more, and that's kind of where the problem lies. And before I close out on this video, while I do talk about the bugs as if they're completely detrimental to Warwick's performance, I think they affect his play rate more than they affect his win rate. But fixing them would certainly make his win rate better. And if clear speed buffs were added as well, which I would love to have, he would definitely probably have too high of a win rate. So I think it's appropriate to talk about what the best ways to nerf the champion would be, so that he is healthy and balanced across all ranks from Iron to Challenger. As it stands, Warwick has always had his highest win rate in Gold or Plat, while struggling in Master Plus, and surprisingly like Iron and Bronze from what I've seen. So nerf should be mostly targeted at like the medium elo range in general. I'll admit that I don't fully understand why he performs so well here, but I can assume that Warwick's early ganks are generally pretty strong in this elo range due to laners always being low HP. So one nerf option I have in mind would be to nerf his Blood Trail movement speed at rank 1. And I also think that nerfs to new Warwicks would be good, since they usually build full tank and they max Q, and they get rewarded for it when Riot could incentivize Warwicks to build more damage, aka riskier and more skill-based playstyle, and also encourage him to max W like they do at the higher ranks. So the following nerf options sound good to me. Nerf his E damage reduction by like 5% at all ranks, or nerf his cooldown. Nerf the percent health damage from his Q to what it was in the previous seasons. This would also nerf Warwick top, by the way, if they were wanting to go that route. They could nerf Warwick's R base damage at later ranks. Or they could buff the passive AD ratio while also reducing the base damage at later ranks. So to kind of sum up Warwick's problems in a little bit of an overview of how I feel he feels this season. Warwick's clear speed has always been pretty much comparable to Graves, in the sense that it started off average, second clear was maybe average, but as he got to the third, fourth, fifth clear, it started to ramp up over time exponentially as he got more damage. But for Warwick this season, it doesn't do that. His first clear is still about the same, but as you go on to your third, fourth, fifth clear, your clear doesn't really improve like it did last season, because you're missing out on Cinderhawk, which, if you went the Cinderhawk route, it would do more damage than the Tank Mythics do this season. And if you went the Warrior route, well, your team out would obviously deal more AoE and you deal more single target damage. So missing out on those strong, some strong early items to actually improve your clear is pretty bad. Because right now, like when you're building into most mythics that seem attractive at all for Warwick, they like basically just give you a bunch of health and like CDR and stuff like that, which isn't really helpful for your clear, honestly, most of the time. So that's an issue. Warwick definitely needs a buff to his clear speed. but I don't know if he needs like that big of a buff to his clear speed, because you got to be careful with it. But I think he could use something to make him more reliable in high elo, because you're, like I said, you're not going to get free kills early on all the time, and he just needs to be able to farm and get to his items. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Also, Warwick doesn't have a extremely prominent mid-game power spike like he did last season. I'll say he overall probably scales a little bit better. I mean, Warwick right now in general, he just still feels decent when you're ahead, but when you fall behind, it's brutal, and that's kind of the issue. Is like I said, in high elo, it's a lot easier to fall behind. He doesn't have the tools to get ahead reliably, and that's why I want like buffs to clear speed a little bit, along with all these bug fixes and stuff like that. So I think Warwick could definitely use something to fix those problems, and that's just how I feel about the champion. He still feels fine from ahead, but he needs help being able to reliably get ahead, because it's not like when he gets ahead, he just strip 1v9s the game or anything. So anyways, that's my final thoughts on Warwick.